Welcome, everyone. We'll give everyone a couple more minutes to join, and we'll just get some housekeeping done while people are logging in. So great news, we've got over 150 people joining us today. While we wait to get started, you'll notice the code for Slido on your screen. We're using Slido for some audience participation today. So there are two ways to participate. Use the hashtag ProofVirtual on your screen to pull up Slido in the browser or in the app on your phone, or you can simply participate at the bottom of the screen and click on Slido. You can use it to post questions. You can then vote on the questions. So, we will take a look at some of the most popular questions. And we'll have some time later on to answer some of the audience questions. And we encourage you to answer the polls. We've got a few audience engagement polls throughout the event today. Just toggle between Q&A and polling to see both of those. The live chat is also active, and we encourage you to share comments and thoughts in the space to connect with fellow attendees. Let's talk about the viewing experience, the ultimate viewing experience. To ensure you have that best viewing experience, please close any windows, programs that would use up bandwidth, obviously other than this webcast link. If you continue to have trouble viewing, click the low bandwidth button below. Finally, technical support. If you require technical assistance during the virtual event, use the help button. Located on the page, and this is monitored by our live web technician who will be able to solve your issue. So, good, that was a couple minutes. Hopefully everyone is joined by now, and thank you so much for attending. Let's get started. I'm Lauren Kuperberg. I'm Vice President at Proof Experiences, and welcome to our third virtual event, engaging employees in a work from home reality. This is presented by Proof Experiences and powered by Livecast. So today we've got an amazing panel of experts and communication leaders from large corporations who will be sharing their tips and best practices for keeping employees informed and motivated in this new era. You'll learn how to best communicate with employees while working from home. You'll learn how the landscape has changed dramatically and the steps you'll need to take to ensure that employees are focused in the months ahead. So to help guide our discussion today, we'll be referencing the results from an internal communications survey that we at Proof Experiences and our sister agency, Agnostic, rolled out just a couple of weeks ago. We went to some of the top communications experts across the country and got some of their answers. So we'll share some of these not yet released insights so you can find out what's changed and why you need to reevaluate your past strategies now. So to kick things off, why don't we start by introducing the panel? First off, Kelly Power, Senior Vice President of Proof Experiences, who I get to work with every single day. Kelly has 20 years of marketing, events, and communications experience on both the client and agency side. She's been very busy successfully transitioning her clients from live events to the virtual space. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us. I'd also like to introduce Lena Knight, Vice President at Agnostic, as I mentioned, our sister agency. Lena has more than 16 years of experience working with clients in the B2B technology, brand, and healthcare sectors, and is focused on driving both communications results and business results for them. Next, we have Daria Hill, Associate Vice President, Corporate Comms and Sponsorships for Interact Corp. Daria has over 15 years of communications experience, and she currently leads all PR, public affairs, issues management, internal communications, sponsorship, and CSR. That's a lot on your plate, Daria. That's awesome. And finally, I'd like to introduce our fourth panelist, Nina Abdelmessi, Chief of Operations and External Relations at Boston Consulting Group. Nina has 25 years of experience at BCG with extensive experience in client service, global, and national practice leadership. Welcome, everyone. So, first things first, before we get into the panel, I'd like to head over to Slido for a second. And I'd love to hear from you, our audience. When it becomes safe to do so, will you be going back to the office on a permanent basis? Or are you looking for some more flexibility? So let's take a look. Go ahead and answer that right now. And we will bring up the results. Okay, so we'll just give everyone a second to input their results here. And I know that, for me personally, and we'll get into it a little bit later on in this discussion, it's been really interesting working from home and going back to the office. I think that there's a few things that I kind of love about working from home, and I'm definitely looking for more of that flexibility when I get back. So let's see, do we have those results? If not, we can come back to them in just a little bit. Oh, here we go. Lots of interesting stuff coming in here. Only 2 days per week, hybrid. Some people aren't even sure yet. So I think it's going to be really interesting. It's going to be a very personal decision for a lot of people. And everyone has different priorities to balance. And that's why we're having this discussion today, because I think it's a really interesting and an important topic. And we're going to get into a lot of these insights today. So let's dive into what everyone is really here for, and that's to hear from our esteemed panel. So I mentioned our survey that we did a couple weeks ago. One of the things that came back was 75% of our survey respondents said that they have a formalized internal communications plan. So that's great. 75% is a great number. But Lena, do you think that number should be 100%? Do all companies, no matter their size, need a formalized internal communications plan, especially now?
Yeah, well, I think, when we look at the poll and we see that 2 or 3 quarters of people did have a formal internal communication strategy, that's great. If you're a company of one, I think that can obviously be, put to the wayside. But, what we're finding now is that particularly as we look to engage remote working employees and a workforce that is dispersed, not just across cities, but oftentimes across the country now, we really need to take into consideration a number of different things when it comes to internal communication. So at the beginning of the pandemic, what we really saw were companies scrambling, trying to figure out, how do I mobilize this workforce? How does my business continue? How do I keep making sure that just the day-to-day is going and running? And so we also tried to think about, is this something that's for the short term or the long term? So I know at Agnostic, we initially said, let's check in 3 weeks and then we'll figure it out from there. Well, it's 9-10 months later, and we are still in the same situation. And so, while initially this would have been perhaps a short-term challenge, what we're realizing is that for the short term and the long term, working remotely is here to stay. And I would say even beyond the rollout of a vaccination. So, as our government looks to distribute vaccinations, there's obviously going to be prioritized populations, which means that for some of us, we'll be continuing to work from home. And so the job to be done right now for all organizations is to really think about developing a strategy that solves for challenges we've not had to deal with before when it comes to internal communications and engaging employees. So that's everything from vastly different workspaces. I'm here at home and I'm very fortunate to be able to have a home office. There are others who need to go to places to have access access to internet. There's been a disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on certain populations. And so as employers, we need to take that into consideration as well. There's also that obliteration between work and home life. So, no longer do we kind of close our computer and then head home on public transit. Now I walk down the stairs and, my daughter and my husband are there and waiting for, what's for dinner and trying to figure out what's happening in the evening. There's also a lot of mental health challenges that an internal communications plan really needs to help, not necessarily solve for, but take into consideration. Everything from employee burnout to over communication. So that's also something that we need to think about when it comes to internal communications. And then lastly, sort of that ongoing worry about the impact of the pandemic from a financial perspective on organizations. So there's that big cloud over everyone's head about, what does this mean? Is business going to continue? Am I still going to have a job? And so these are all things that need to be addressed in an internal communications program. And I'd say that we're at the beginning stages of really reimagining internal comms and employee engagement. And I think that if the pandemic has taught those of us in the knowledge industry anything, it's that your employees are truly your number one stakeholder. And so if you don't have a plan for them, then you don't have a plan for success.
Thanks, Lena. Kelly, I'll turn it over to you because I think, you talk about, Lena was talking about employees and how integral they are to the business. You spend a lot of your time executing these internal communications plans. What have you been seeing with your clients?
Yeah. I think definitely echo what Lena commented on. From my perspective and my role specifically being around internal events, really what our role is to help create and foster connections and bringing people together. So it's really just one element of a larger internal communications plan. And what we're seeing and what I'm seeing in particular is, internal events have not always been part of a formal employee communication plan. We've done a lot of live internal employee events, whether they're AGMs or town halls or celebrations. But now, given the situation that we're in with the pandemic, my clients are really, calling us and having conversations around how do we bring people together. So clients who have never done employee events are now wanting it more than ever. So we're seeing a lot of demand for really bringing people together under one virtual roof, just to create that sense of togetherness, because everyone's really isolated and try to keep that connection and keep that community. And then really the biggest questions that I'm seeing is, so how do we do it? It's yes, virtual events is not new, but it's at the forefront more than ever before. And there's no playbook. There's not a lot of knowledge on how to go forward with that. So getting a lot of questions on what are some fun ideas, what are other companies doing, and basically help us navigate these waters that we haven't been in before.
Great, thank you. So let's turn it over to Nina. We're lucky to have two panelists from two different industries today. And I'm curious how you, Nina, and Daria, I'm curious how your strategies have changed since the pandemic began. For instance, are there certain elements that you've dialed up because of how many people are working remotely? Nina, why don't we start with you?
Well, I would say almost everything has changed. And so we sort of threw everything out of the box and have put it back in a pretty deliberate fashion. I think most importantly, we have made our communication strategy really a two-way dialogue so that we can meet people where they are. I mean, we've got lots of different mechanisms for taking the pulse of our staff. Formally through surveys, one-on-ones with employees, small group formats. We've formed a kitchen cabinet, which is sort of a cross-section of employees across functions and across tenures with the firm to really try to understand what the issues are for people, what they want more or less of. And from that, we've developed really a menu of different formats for people to engage in. There are regular all staff sessions. There are segments of the population that we've focused on and in smaller group formats. And then interestingly, we've tried to sort of recreate the idea of collisions, those kind of unexpected meetings that people would have in the office by in unplanned moments. We've had to plan them a little bit, but we have created mentorship hours and coffee chat pair-ups and other ways of enabling our folks to interact with each other. We've paid real attention to segmenting our audiences. And so, there are a group of employees, for example, who have joined BCG in the last 6 or 12 months who have physically never been to an office. And so we are really thinking about segmenting communication strategy to try to address the needs of specific employees. And then I would say, finally, we've tried to make things a bit fun. And so I think, what we're going through for many people is not fun. And so I think injecting a bit of humanity and bringing people's full lives into the communication. So when we have all staff town halls, for example, we encourage people, your family, your pets, let's see where you are, turn your camera on, we're all in this together. And that has been a helpful addition to the ways in which we're communicating.
That's great. I love what you said about the collisions. I know that for me personally, that's one of the things that, as someone who loves to go around the office and chat with people, and I really miss that. It's been nice today to be in the office and go bug Kelly down the hall for me. It's been it's been really nice, and I really miss that. Daria, let's talk to you for a second. Anything specific in your industry and specifically at Interac that has really changed from your internal communications plan?
Yeah, I think, the first thing is Interac. You might know of us, when you're sending an e-transfer or pulling out your mobile debit card and paying for something. And so we are, not only are we a financial brand, we're a technology company. And so I think for us, that was really important during the pandemic because, this is actually a big brand, but we're 400 employees. And, because we're in tech and because all parts of our organization was really focused on digitally accelerating and transforming during the pandemic, that notion of transformation was not only relevant in internal communications, but across the org. So I think that, one of the first things we do, we have this mantra that we use at Interac: all informed, all aligned, all engaged. And so, I think what we really, started first is make sure, how do we get that alignment across the organization? How do we partner up with HR, with legal, with tech and ops, with risk? We very quickly put together what we call the pandemic task force, with decision-making capabilities that met every day within the sort of height of it, who could bundle up sort of, key business decisions or key employee decisions to the executive committee. So we had that sort of infrastructure in place. And I think, Nina, to your point, really like HR is such a partner of internal comms, and really holding hands with them to make sure that employee feedback loop, is something that internal comms can react to. And in a timely way. And I would say, overall, that was a big focus for us, was really increasing, the frequency and the depth of our communication strategy. People were feeling, they needed that reassurance from leaders. And, we took what was a monthly newsletter and quarterly town halls, and suddenly we were doing things every week. So we were distributing a CEO video every week to our employees to reassure them. First about even the basics like employee, and job stability and the resiliency of the organization. I mean, we are moving people's money every day. And so the organization felt the weight of that responsibility. So making sure that, we also focused on really setting up the right employee resources. Very quickly in the pandemic, we introduced something called quiet hours, and we still, I'm really proud that we have that today. So, 3 hours in the day, in the morning, at lunchtime, and in the afternoon, those are quiet hours, generally where we ask you don't book a meeting. You don't, you let your employees really either take that time to quietly work or to do pickup or drop off or tend to, elder care or whatever it was. And obviously that doesn't work across the organization, but if you set up some frameworks that allow people that flexibility to dial in and out, I think that's really important. Obviously, making sure that, we are focused on, making sure that the tech is also there, that we're consolidating the tech, which I know we'll talk about in a little bit. But these were all strategies that we had to, take on very quickly and really make sure that they lasted. And they're still going to last.
I love that, and I love the quiet hours. I think that's so great, but it's so important. I think that it's a top-down approach, right? That's being implemented from the top and making sure that people know that it's okay, right? So that there's no guilt felt when you're doing some of those things, because it's all part of what we need to deal with on a day-to-day basis. But there can sometimes that guilt can creep in of like, oh, I'm not accessible, or, I need to do something else. So that's fantastic. It's a really amazing initiative. Let's take a look at some of the results from our recent survey. So these are some of the tools and technology that companies have adopted over the past few months. That's what we were asking everyone. And so we took a look at the results, and what was really interesting for us was, and it wasn't a huge surprise, but business collaboration channels and tools are way up. So things like Slack and Hangouts and Teams. Town halls was another thing that really sort of came in second place. So the increase, and I think that's been mentioned a couple of times, the increase of town halls to make sure that the communication from senior leadership is coming more frequently, and there's more transparency. But some of the least used things were socially distanced hangouts. So really people are which is great. I think people are respecting the rules and not trying to push that on their employees. And then social media channels was also not something that was being used from an internal communications perspective. So Kelly, I'll turn this over to you. What are you seeing from an agency perspective with your clients? And what are you recommending to help reach and engage their employees?
That's a big question. I will speak specifically to the survey question was around the channels and the technology that's being used. And definitely since everything we're doing is virtual, what technology is like the question of the year. People want to know when it comes to virtual events, what's the one technology that's the be all and end all. And there is honestly no one size fits all. There's so many different technology platforms. I'm going to mention a few at the end, but I don't like to just jump into which ones are our preferred ones. But really what I'm recommending with our clients is that when it comes to virtual events as part of the internal communications plan is to look outside of the tools that you're using on a day-to-day basis. So don't default to Teams, don't default to Zoom, don't default to, email is not a virtual event platform, but look to introduce a new technology platform. One, because it's good to try stuff. Daria, you mentioned that, digital acceleration is important. And I think for whether you're a tech company or not, dip your toe in the water and try new technologies. And if it's not perfect, try something new the next time. But really an event technology that is web-based. So it's simple, it's easy for your audience to navigate. It shouldn't be a complicated thing for your employees to figure out. Something that has a lot of features that enable a two-way participation. And, when it comes to internal communications and events, that two-way engagement is so critical to getting your employees to be committed and not just kind of along for the ride. So we look for things that have a lot of live chat function, the ability to break out into small teams, the ability to have, one-on-one video chats during curated times of the event. and also to facilitate, your main stage presentation. So the more features that allow for that engagement is really important. So to kind of answer your questions, which technologies, we've been recommending a few. We are platform agnostic, but some of the ones that we've enjoyed using are Swoogo, vFairs, EventMobi, Feedloop. There is lots of great options out there. There's lots of not so great options out there. But I think it's worth, talking to somebody who has some experience with the technology platforms to guide you in that direction, because they come in all shapes and sizes. Sorry, long-winded answer, Lauren. There's one thing I want to say when it comes to technology, is it's really important that technology is not the be-all and end-all of the solution when it comes to virtual events for your employees. It's a tool, but it takes a team and people who understand the audience and how to put on a virtual event to really figure out how to design that human connection, which is what we're trying to accomplish with internal events.
Thanks, Cal. Daria, I'll turn it over to you. What are you guys specifically using at Interac?
We're a Microsoft 365 shop. So I think, one of our big ahas early in the pandemic was, sometimes you just need to audit and see what you have. You might actually have so many licenses through your tech partners on all sorts of tools that haven't been used before the pandemic. So we really did that. And we decided to pilot a few new things. I think to your point, Kelly, there's no better time right now than to try new digital tools with your employees. I mean, that digital transformation, you can really make an impact. So we launched, a new SharePoint resource just for our employees, and we wanted to test that against our usual intranet, and lo and behold, we found that it was way more successful. The engagement was way more successful. So that's part of our priority in 21 is how do we really toss out what's not working and really accelerate what is. And I mean, I think the other big thing for us was making sure when you're in a growing organization or when you're in a large organization, there can be a lot of sort of digital tool leakage. Lots of people might be out trying different tools, and that alignment and the role of internal comms in aligning the tools, and then really just explaining to the organization what should they be using, how should they be using it, and repeating that message, because I think that alignment is powerful when everyone's using it effectively. There's that power in numbers, and so that's one of the things we've really focused on is honing our technology.
Great, thanks, Daria. So let's talk for a second. In our survey, we got some results back that 80% of the workforce is actually satisfied working from home. So I know that for me personally, it's definitely made it easier for me to get my kids to hockey and baseball in the evening. It's actually giving me more time to do my work and get my work done, and then be able to leave directly from my desk in my dining room. And it's been really nice to have dinner with my family. My family eats early. It's been really nice to be able to do that with them as well. But working from home, even though 80% of the workforce is satisfied working from home, I think it also comes with its own set of challenges, right? So let's talk about those for a second. So specifically some of the barriers encountered over the last few months in this new environment. So if we take a look at the results from our poll, I think, some of the things that popped out for us were there was a real lack of distinction between home and work. And I was just having a conversation this morning about that difference. And someone coming into the office 3 days a week now, and what they said to me was home is starting to feel like home again, which I thought was just really interesting because not everything is blended all together. And then the other things that stood out for us was the disconnect between teams and the inability to collaborate. I know that for me personally, collaborating with my colleagues, we talked about those collisions in the office before, but really being able to sit with someone and work on something together. The tools that we have can't replicate that perfectly. they're pretty good, but they're not perfect. So I'd love to hear from everyone here on, how this compares to your situations and some of the biggest challenges that you're facing. Lena, we'll start with you from an agency perspective. What are you currently seeing from a challenges and barriers perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it can come with its own set of challenges. And I think we've outlined quite a few of them here. At Agnostic, we're a very collaborative, creative team. And, we oftentimes will just banter during the day and try to build on something as the day progresses. But it's harder to do that over, virtual and through virtual meetings. And so that can be a bit of a challenge with tech delays, with glitches in the system to try to brainstorm and come up with something creative. So from an agnostic perspective, I would say that is what we're facing. From a client perspective, I think that what we're really hearing kind of underscores all of the things that we found in our poll. And ultimately, that's really uncertainty. So, the question is, how do you keep that workforce motivated when there's so much uncertainty in the world, nevertheless, within their own work environment and their own job? And so, that's something that we're helping our clients navigate, is that uncertainty, and helping provide clarity and some comfort to employees, as they face those blending of work and home life challenges, the inability to connect. But there's also a future challenge that we're seeing on the horizon. And that is, whenever we go back to whatever normal looks like after this, and as companies start to scale up and start to build their teams up, we're seeing that there could be a potential for a talent race. And that's something that we also need to be mindful of. So, I think that, Nina really kind of hit the nail on the head there by opening up a two-way dialogue between employees and management to really help make sure that we're hearing from employees about what these challenges are and then helping to create some solutions for them. And so what we think is that the companies who have, that open dialogue, who again put their employees as their number one stakeholder, they are the ones who are going to retain that top talent, and they're the ones who are going to see an influx of talent who perhaps were laid off or furloughed early on in the pandemic. And so, from a challenges perspective, those are really the things that we're facing right now. And, when it comes to sort of satisfaction from working from home, I agree. I think that there's so many positives to it. Personally, I think it's been great. I probably would be one of those people who's a bit of a hybrid, a little bit of time in the office, a little bit of time at home, just because I'm also a bit of a social creature. But, I think that it's kind of hard right now to actually truly gauge what's going on from a satisfaction perspective, because there is no other option. You are either satisfied or you're not, and then you're miserable. And so right now, I feel like everyone is just kind of getting on with the job of working because there's not really another choice. And so I think that the true test is really going to be when, again, we're back to whatever new normal awaits us, hopefully post-pandemic, hopefully soon. Flexibility is really going to be the key for organizations to help sort of combat those challenges, to put programming in place to make sure that employees feel comfortable coming into the office, or that they feel empowered to continue working from home. Because what we've seen from our study and from others is that actually work productivity has increased for the most part, even though, in our poll, we found that 50% of respondents are saying that, they are actually feeling less motivated. So it's a really interesting balance between, motivation on one hand and output on the other. So I think it's something that, we need to continue as internal comms people discussing and trying to have that two-way dialogue like Nina was talking about earlier with our employees.
Thanks, Lena. Daria, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm curious to hear some of the challenges that you've been facing, but I'm going to add a little curveball to this because we got a question from the audience that I wanted to direct. It was specifically for you. And I think it intertwines with the challenges that we're facing. So I'm just going to read it off. So your internal pandemic group met daily during the height of the pandemic. So the question here was, so what's happening now, and how do you keep tired and long-term stressed people engaged?
It's a great question. I think, just to answer the first part, right now our pandemic task force is meeting every 2 weeks, and it's shrunk to a smaller core team, still representative of kind of all those groups I talked about. But we still assess what are the government triggers, what is the news saying, because our pandemic plan and our sort of work from home or work from the office plan is really based on the triggers of what's happening in our city and our province and obviously nationally. So we intake that and we make sure, how do we right size some of the policies that we're looking at, or what new things do we need to recommend? And I would say, to answer the question about the challenge, I think the number one challenge, and Lena, you hit the nail on the head here, it's fatigue. People are I think more productive than ever. And certainly we feel that at Interact. But I think people are really tired. They're really, really tired because of those blurring lines. And so that's going to be the number one thing that we need to focus on. And when you think about internal communications, our role is prioritization of message in an organization. It's also what we don't communicate about the business priorities. That's equally as important about what we do really prioritize. So we are really embedded in sort of the strategy groups, in the business groups, to really intake what's going on, what projects have we heightened, and what do employees really, really need to know, and what do we leave on the table. We're going through a massive prioritization exercise right now of our initiatives, our corporate objectives. What can we feasibly actually accomplish in today's environment, and what do we need to scale back? So that work is underway, and we're figuring it out. It's not a perfect exercise, but we're certainly learning as we go. I think the other thing, a close cousin to fatigue, is mental health. And that's a serious and an important thing that, we're going to have to, really lock hands with HR again and focus on next year. Introducing, now's the time to introduce new benefits, look at your benefits. We're offering, 6 virtual counseling sessions per employee this year that we're rolling out, because the need to make sure that those resources are in place is critical. And then I think when we think about the employee engagement activities, it's how do you make sure that you're reaching all corners of your organization? It's a age-old, challenge of internal communications. You're not getting the same people participating in the virtual bingo that you've done, or you're really trying to reach into the introverts, the extroverts. And so we're looking at a bunch of, corporate-led initiatives, but also team-led initiatives, and giving that opportunity for teams to really, who know their employees well, to think about engagement opportunities and just enable that from a resourcing perspective, so they can really cater to what people want.
Great. Thanks, Daria. Nina, some of the challenges that you're seeing at BCG right now. Talk about those.
Sure. Well, first of all, we've asked our employees the question that I think Lauren and Lena, you both answered, in terms of people's satisfaction with working from home and flexibility. And so, similar to what you've described, not 90% of our staff want to have continued flexibility in terms of their location of work. But what they're really craving is connection, affiliation, and in-person interaction with others. And in that context, it's really important to recognize that our entire employee value proposition has shifted. And so our business, professional services, it's a very demanding profession. We ask a lot of our employees, and a lot of the work demands are still there, but the stuff that makes it fun is missing now. So those, unplanned meetings, plane rides with a very senior person, seeing someone in the hallway in the office, working in a beautiful workspace, a lot of those things are not part of the employee value proposition anymore. And so, we're trying to understand what those latent needs are of our employees, and as I said before, meet them where they are. some of the challenges that we have been facing are very similar to those that have been mentioned already. I mean, certainly mental health, anxiety, isolation, depression. We have a very young workforce, and so a lot of our employees live on their own. They live in not a lot of square foot per person, sometimes shared with one or several roommates that they're now discovering they don't actually like very much. And so I think there's a recipe there for folks feeling not fully themselves. We too have done a lot in terms of the formal. So looking at our benefits, working hard on education, skill development, access to supports, and then at every altitude also we have daily meditation sessions and other kind of self-care programming to help people bring their full selves to work. And on the issue of fluidity between work and home, I mean, the feedback that we're getting is that our employees never feel fully effective in either place. And so while they're always on, they're not fully effective in the workplace, and they're not fully effective on the home front. And so we're trying to support everyone by building in some kind of structural breaks. I think, Daria, you had mentioned kind of no-fly zones for quiet time. So we also have some power downs on Fridays, like don't schedule meetings on Friday afternoons. We have suggested daily team check-in times at the end of the day. So to check in with everyone, make sure that you've accomplished what you need to, and just a touch point with the teams that you're working in every single day. And then we've also created some more sort of structural options and opportunities. So enabling employees to, for example, take leave of absence, but still with benefits, or to reduce their working capacity to less than 100% in order to build in time for their own obligations on the home front. But bringing it back to our plans going forward, I mean, really those continuous listening forums that we have been super helpful in identifying where to channel our energy in the highest impact spots for our staff.
Great, thank you, Nina. Kelly, I'll turn it over to you. I always find that your perspective is really interesting because you're sort of behind the scenes on some of the events when these things are executing, and you get to a little bit more of that behind the scenes with the employees directly. Any challenges that are sort of bubbling to the top that you're seeing across some of the events that we're doing?
There's Nina, you talked about, one of the biggest challenges being, keeping people connected. You have a workforce that would have, frequently been interacting with each other, whether it's on a flight somewhere for a business meeting or in the office, or especially for a large organization. And I would echo that those are the calls that we're getting from clients most often, is really trying to come up with tools and solutions to help facilitate that connection. Not every day. I think, people have really found their way with business collaboration and really getting effective with their work, but trying to, keep alive the spirit of connection and community. And, one particular situation comes to mind, and I'm seeing this with a lot of larger organizations that have a workforce in the high hundreds or multiple thousands across the country, where, as an organization, we did an event and they had a large rebrand as an organization. And not ever in the history of their company had they had all 1,000 people together live, but they had a culture where they were seeing each other frequently, whether it was in office or in their regional locations, and especially with organizations that have employees in all different sorts of cross-functional roles. So this was an organization that has people working in apartment buildings as apartment building managers, janitorial staff, all the way to, the CFO and global offices as well. And they said, we're really, struggling with how to get people really connected and feeling like we have that sense of community. So, having a virtual event and having everyone under kind of one roof was the first ever for this organization, and seeing those kind of responses and feeling and emotion come out of this event, and this sense of togetherness was really overwhelming for the organization itself. So, kind of coming back to that core challenges of connection.
Thanks, Kelly. Let's go back to some audience engagement here. We're going to set up a cloud poll question for everyone right now. And I want to know from you, our audience, how are you celebrating employees, or how are you being celebrated as an employee of your organization? So you can go ahead and enter your answer in there, and we'll get the results. I can tell you, we just listened to some of the challenges, and I'm a glass half full kind of guy. So I prefer to focus on more of the positives. So we are heading back to the polls. That's a joke that I wanted to maybe skirt around, but as a Canadian, I feel a little bit more comfortable talking about going back to the polls. So let's take a look at some of the results. I'll just give it another second here. And then we're going to get into, quickly, I want to hear, from everyone. And if we can just do it quickly, I want to make sure that we hit all of we've got some amazing questions coming in from the audience. I want to hear how you are celebrating employees, or how your clients are celebrating employees. Lena, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we've done everything virtual. So our team works on WebEx, and we've had a lot of great trivia, which has been fun and interesting to see the choices that our team makes when it comes to trivia. But that's been, a really great way for us to meet once a week and just put aside work and, everyone kind of grab a drink together and have some fun. I love what one of our clients did is they had a CEO story time, because, we do see, most of my clients have seen my little curly hair girl. I think Nina's met her a couple of times now. And, kids are a part of your everyday now, both at work and at home. And so the CEO every night, once a week, she would read a story to kids virtually over WebEx and have both her employees and their kids there. And what that does is it brings your kids into your workplace and makes them feel like, yeah, absolutely, I'm seen too. And that's really amazing. And so I think that those types of things have been really great. Seeing in the poll that there's lots of sort of deliveries and gifts and things like that. Food goes over really, really well with our team. So, it's those little surprise and delights that, to continue recognizing birthdays or work milestones that have gone a really long way. Even above and beyond monetary recognition. So, giving employees money is fantastic, but sending my favorite lemon birthday cake to me, a whole cake on my birthday, in addition to the cake I had at home, I have to say it was really nice. Maybe not for my pants, but it was a really great way to kind of celebrate with my team virtually. And so, when we think about internal comms, oftentimes we think about what is it that we're trying to say and how do we communicate that? But I think if anything kind of sums it up, it's Maya Angelou who says, people will forget what you said, but they're never going to forget how you made them feel. And so it's these little things that help make your employees feel like we see you, we hear you, we value you. That's ultimately the goal of an employee engagement program. And so I'm loving some of the things that are coming up on the poll. And I think as the pandemic rolls on, we're just going to see more and more of that.
Thanks, Lena. Kelly, what's the best thing that you're seeing from an employee celebration standpoint?
Got so much. And Lena, you touched on so much of it. The one trend that we're seeing and we're recommending a lot is just letting people see the human side. We're literally inviting our employees and our colleagues into each other's homes or kitchens or dining rooms or bedrooms. With a lot of the events we've done, it's especially at the executive level when they are virtually in front of their entire workforce and they can't see them face to face, but they're being welcomed into their home. We're trying to let that piece be really authentic, and whether it's using somebody's sense of humor or using their creativity. We did an event where we had, two executives do a bake-off because both of them happened to have their offices in their kitchen. So we, kicked off a regular town hall with a bit of a bake-off. So again, I think Nina said, have a little bit of fun. I mean, we're all human beings. We're all in this together, letting people's personality shine and just welcoming into each other's homes authentically.
Great. Nina, I'll turn it over to you. We're running a little bit short on time, but I'd love, what's the one thing that you're really proud of from a, celebrating employee standpoint?
Well, I have two. So is that okay?
Yeah, we've got
okay. I mean, I have many, but two really great ones. So we, of course, have all the formal recognition programs, but we have, and some of them we put a COVID twist on, but we have really dialed up some fun challenges and celebrations. So we have had a fitness challenge all across all of North America. We've had a battle of the bands, so virtual bands recording fun COVID-related lyrics and songs, and all staff involved in voting on the best ones. So those are our two favorites. And then just one other call out, Kelly, you mentioned the idea of authentically kind of bringing people into each other's lives. I mean, we are engaging people, our employees' entire families. So we have created connections through Halloween parties, games nights. We had a summer camp series. I mean, we really are trying to take care of everyone in our communications. That was more than two, Lauren, but there's a long list of stuff.
I love it. Daria, I'll kick it over to you.
We're having the same kind of fun at Interact, paint night, cooking classes, murder mystery at Halloween. I think one thing that we're looking forward to, holidays is coming, so we can't do holiday parties this year. So it's a holiday catalog where you can pick your favorite small business and support them through that way. So really trying to make the connections back to the business and what the business is doing as well. And then also promote it, promote all this good employer brand stuff and tie it to your external communication strategies too. I would say those are our highlights.
Awesome. So let's move on to our last question. And with this question, I want to look ahead. I want to talk specifically about your internal communications priorities for 2021. I am ready for 2020 to be behind us, that's for sure. So let's take a look at some of the results from our survey. And one of the things, team unification was, it's a common refrain from today's session, really topped the priorities at close to 60%, and followed by ongoing mental health initiatives at just over 30%. And we heard a lot about that today as well. Daria, what are some of the top priorities for you in 2021? And I'm going to add in, because we have a really great question from the audience. And one thing I want to add there is, how are you measuring engagement looking ahead to 2021? And have your KPIs changed at all? Or are you looking to change your KPIs going into 2021?
That's an excellent question. And I think it really summarizes what our priority is, we are going through tremendous transformation organizationally. We're growing, as I mentioned before. And so how do we tie our internal communication strategy to, what we're doing in the pandemic, to kind of our culture transformation and our growth transformation as an organization? And so we are really setting up KPIs that, measure, that go back to our, employee monitor scores, that go back to, we quadrupled them, ironically, in the pandemic, in terms of, how employees felt, whether they felt like they had the information they needed to do their job, whether they felt kind of aligned. And so continuing that with that metric and tying it back to culture and business transformation will be really key for us. And I think, as your revenue, and if you're one of those companies that's in healthcare or technology, or you're lucky that your revenue is growing and your people, resources are growing, it's how do you make sure that the internal comms function is growing alongside of that? So ensuring that we're communicating that investment in employees and in that return back to the organization. I think what we all agree on is the pandemic is a perfect breeding ground for an employee crisis if we do not nurture our number one asset. And so, that is well-being, workload management, mental health are going to be really important. And then accelerating any new digital tool platforms. We're going to relaunch our intranet next year. So that's something we're really looking forward to diving into.
Awesome. Nina, I'll give you the final word on your plans for 2021 and your priorities for 2021.
Well, from our perspective, I think what has made us successful so far in this crazy time will continue to serve us well. And so it is about transparency, being nimble for the environment, and then continuing to ensure just a broad menu of options to meet people where they are. And that ties to the measurement piece. I think the continuous dialogue with our staff through both formal engagement survey type vehicles, but also just the informal roundtables and kitchen cabinets to help make sure that we're pointing our guns in the right direction will be an incredibly ongoing, important part of what we do.
That's great. We are almost out of time, but I've tried to incorporate a couple of the questions as we've gone along. But there was one that came in here that I'll give to both you, Daria, and Nina. It's around increasing your spend and budget. Specifically for culture and employee engagement. Have you talk about a lot of these initiatives. Some are really simple to execute and really sort of can be done on the inexpensive side. But have you looked for more dollars to help engage employees a little bit more? Let's start with you this time.
Yep. And so I think, yes, we have looked at redirecting funds. And so what this pandemic has done is given us an opportunity to really comb through and better understand the nature of many of our different types of costs, some of which we're not incurring anymore. And so really from a kind of bottoms up point of view, give us a sense of how we can redirect some funds into some of these activities. Because yes, some of them do have cost and many don't. Yeah. But it has been a holistic exercise from the bottom up to determine how to fund this programming.
Great. And Daria, what about at Interact?
Yeah, same. Reallocation of funds. What sponsorships were and events. You paid for the venues and for food. You can reallocate in different ways now. How do you go to finance and take what used to be maybe T&E budgets for travel and this and that? How do you reallocate them to employee engagement activities? So I think it's just creative. It's being creative with the dollars you have. And then also looking at that sort of per employee growth. Like if you're adding talent to your company, then you've got to add engagement and internal comms considerations and costs. So it's constant business casing to reinforce the value and the growth of your function, really.
Awesome. That is just about it for us. Timing was amazing. So big thank you to all of our panelists. I think it's clear more than ever, putting a real plan in place is imperative to overall employee engagement and satisfaction. The landscape is obviously more challenging. But it's really inspiring to hear all of your answers, how you've all risen to the challenge. And I think that there are many who are actually enjoying this new routine. So there's still lots of work to be done. And as we do this more, I think expectations from employees are going to continue to grow. It makes our jobs more challenging, but I think it also makes them a lot more fun. It takes some creativity and a little bit of risk, and I'm all for it. So that concludes our session for today. We're planning on continuing these virtual events quarterly, so keep your eyes out for our next event early on in the new year. You can look out for a quick survey later today. Your feedback really helps us continue to improve our events. Recordings of today's session and a summary article on our blog will be shared next week. And obviously, if there's anything that we can do to help you with your virtual events coming up, internal or external, please don't hesitate to reach out. We are always around and happy to talk. Thank you again to all of our panelists, and have a great day, everyone.